The crimson dawn crept across the ancient forests of Xylos, casting blood-red shadows through the massive trees that had stood sentinel for millennia. Lyra moved like liquid shadow between them, each step deliberate and silent. The marks of successful hunts adorned her copper skin, intricate scarifications that told the story of her prowess. At 23 cycles, she was the youngest hunter to earn so many, each one a testament to a life taken with skill and honor. The bloodstone blade hung at her hip, its curved edge gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse with anticipation. The weapon had been passed down through generations of Kara's finest hunters, and now it was hers, at least until she completed the final hunt and claimed her rightful place as Storm's Eye, the supreme leader of her tribe. The prey arrives today. Elder Kale had told her that morning, his weathered face impassive as he handed her the ceremonial hunting paint. A creature from beyond the sky, not of our world, but worthy of the blade. The stars have chosen your final hunt, Lyra. Do not disappoint your ancestors. Lyra had nodded, accepting her duty without question. To question was to show weakness, and weakness had no place among the Kara. The hunt was everything, the measure of worth, the path to leadership, the cornerstone of their society. Since she was old enough to hold a training blade, Lyra had lived by this truth. Yet now, crouched on a high branch, overlooking the smoking wreckage of something alien and gleaming, she felt an unfamiliar twinge of curiosity. The metal contraption had torn through the forest canopy, leaving a scarred path of destruction before embedding itself in the valley floor. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, angular, with strange markings and materials that reflected the sunlight in ways that made her eyes hurt. And then movement caught her attention. Something emerged from the wreckage, stumbling and disoriented. A figure that walked on two legs like her own people, but was covered in strange, tight-fitting materials rather than the practical leathers and woven fibers of the Kara. The figure, female, Lyra noted, clutched at her arm where a dark liquid stained the covering. Blood. The prey was injured. This would be an easier hunt than anticipated. Disappointment flickered briefly through Lyra's mind. She had expected more of a challenge for her final hunt. But as she watched, the strange female began methodically examining the wreckage, pulling out various objects and organizing them with purpose despite her injury. There was intelligence in those movements, a calculated efficiency that spoke of training and skill, if not in hunting, then in something else entirely. Perhaps this would be interesting after all. Lyra settled in to observe. The Kara way was to know your prey before striking, to understand its patterns, weaknesses, and strengths. A true hunter did not rush. Patience was as much a weapon as the blade. As the day progressed, Lyra learned much about her prey. The strange female spoke to herself in an incomprehensible language, her voice rising and falling with emotions Lyra could recognize even without understanding the words. Frustration, determination, occasional moments of what sounded like dry humor. The prey tried repeatedly to activate a small device, pointing it toward the sky, but each attempt ended with a shake of her head. When night fell, bringing with it the luminescent glow of Xylos's native flora, the prey built a small fire with surprising skill, using some kind of tool that produced flame instantly. She tended to her wound with careful precision, applying substances from a small container before wrapping the injury with a clean, white material. Lyra watched all of this with growing intrigue. This was not a mindless beast to be tracked and dispatched. This prey had purpose, skill, and intelligence that rivaled, perhaps even surpassed in some ways, that of the Kara. For the first time in her hunting career, Lyra found herself considering what might be lost when her blade finally found its mark. But such thoughts were dangerous, a distraction from the path. Lyra pushed them aside. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin in earnest. Morning brought a surprise. The prey had vanished from the camp. Lyra cursed herself for the momentary lapse in vigilance. She had allowed herself to drift into a shallow sleep during the darkest hours, confident that the prey was settled for the night. A rookie mistake, one she had not made since her first solo hunt as a child. Swiftly, she picked up the trail, footprints in the soft earth, broken twigs, a small scrap of the strange material the prey wore caught on a thorny bush. The prey moved with purpose, not randomly fleeing, but heading in a specific direction, northeast toward the crystal falls. Interesting. The tracking was not difficult. The prey clearly had no experience in concealing her path in this type of terrain. Yet there was something about the deliberate nature of her movement that gave Lyra pause. Was she being led into a trap? It seemed unlikely, given the prey's unfamiliarity with Xylos, but Lyra had not become the tribe's finest hunter by underestimating her quarry. By midday, Lyra had closed the distance considerably. She could hear the prey now, moving through the dense undergrowth ahead, occasionally stopping, collecting samples, Lyra realized, observing from behind a massive iridescent fern as the strange female carefully placed bits of plant life in a small, transparent containers. The prey was not fleeing. She was exploring, studying. This was not fear-driven movement, but purposeful investigation. Lyra could have taken her then. A single thrown blade to the back of the neck would have ended it cleanly. But something held her back. Some nameless curiosity that whispered for her to wait, to watch, to understand more before striking. Elder Kale would have been disappointed in her hesitation, but Lyra justified it as proper hunting technique. Know your prey completely before taking its life. The prey continued her methodical exploration, seemingly oblivious to Lyra's presence despite being tracked for hours. Then, just as the twin moons of Xylos began their slow rise in the early evening sky, something changed. The prey stopped suddenly, her body language shifting from relaxed curiosity to alert wariness. Slowly, deliberately, she turned and looked directly toward Lyra's hiding place. "I know you're there," she called out in her strange language, the words meaningless but the intent clear. "You've been following me all day." Lyra remained perfectly still, impressed despite herself. How had the prey sensed her? No Kara had ever detected Lyra when she didn't wish to be found. The prey spoke again, this time gesturing to a small device in her hand that emitted a soft, pulsing light. Some kind of detection tool, Lyra realized. Technology, not skill. She felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. After a tense moment, the prey sighed, put away the device, and continued on her way, though now her movements were more cautious, her stops less frequent. She knew she was hunted. Good. The chase was always more satisfying when the prey was aware. It added an element of challenge that Lyra welcomed. For 3 more days, this strange dance continued. Lyra tracked the prey across the varied terrain of Xylos, from dense jungle to rocky outcroppings, across shallow streams, and through fields of phosphorescent fungi. Several times, she could have ended the hunt, but each opportunity revealed some new aspect of the prey that gave her pause. The prey adapted quickly to the environment, learning which plants were safe to touch and which emitted toxic spores when disturbed. She treated the forest with a respect that few outsiders would show, taking only small samples and leaving minimal impact on her surroundings. Once, when startled by one of Xylos's massive flying predators, she didn't panic, but instead made herself appear larger and made a sharp, loud sound that actually drove the creature away. Most surprisingly, on the 3rd night, when a young Borrelian cub, one of the smaller omnivores of Xylos, approached her camp with an injured paw, the prey didn't drive it away or kill it for food. Instead, she carefully treated the creature's wound, speaking softly to it in her strange language as she worked. The cub, initially fearful, eventually relaxed under her touch and curled up near her fire for the night. Lyra watched all of this with growing disquiet. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Prey fled, fought, or succumbed. It didn't study its environment with intellectual curiosity. It didn't show compassion to other creatures. It didn't adapt and learn and respect the world around it. On the morning of the 4th day, the prey made a critical error. While gathering more samples near a swift-flowing tributary of the great river, she dropped a small device into the water. The prey made a sound of distress, the first genuine emotional outburst Lyra had witnessed, and reached desperately for the device as the current carried it away. In her haste, she left behind a different device near the river's edge. Lyra waited until the prey had moved on, still clearly frustrated by her loss, before approaching the forgotten item. It was a small rectangular object with a smooth surface. When Lyra cautiously touched it, it illuminated with strange symbols and images. Lyra quickly secured the device in her pack. It might provide insight into her increasingly perplexing prey. That night, while the prey slept fitfully in a makeshift shelter, Lyra examined her find. Through experimentation, she discovered that pressing certain areas of the device caused it to display different images or produce soft sounds. One particular sequence of touches caused the device to emit the prey's voice. Lyra nearly dropped it in surprise before realizing it was some sort of recording. Though she couldn't understand the words, the cadence was methodical, professional, until it wasn't. After what seemed to be formal observations about plants and atmospheric conditions, the prey's voice became softer, more personal. There was emotion in those unknown words, longing perhaps, determination certainly, and something else that Lyra couldn't quite identify, a quality that made her think of the nights when the tribe gathered around the central fire to share stories of their ancestors and their connections to one another. Lyra fell asleep with the strange device clutched in her hand, the prey's voice echoing in her dreams. The fifth day brought change. The skies of Xylos, typically clear with occasional wisps of violet clouds, began to darken ominously. The forest grew unnaturally still, the usual chorus of creature sounds fading to tense silence. Lyra recognized the signs immediately. A storm was coming, and not just any storm. A tempest, a rare but devastating meteorological event that could reshape parts of the forest in a single night. The prey seemed to sense the danger as well. Her pace quickened, and she began to head west, toward higher ground. A wise move, but not wise enough. The path she chose would take her straight into Whispering Gorge, a deep ravine that became a deadly funnel for floodwaters during heavy rains. Lyra found herself quickening her own pace, not to close in for the kill, but with a growing sense of concern. The prey didn't know the danger ahead. She couldn't possibly know. The storm broke with sudden violence, just as the prey reached the upper edge of the gorge. Wind tore through the forest with enough force to uproot smaller trees. Rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, turning the ground to treacherous mud within minutes. Lightning split the sky in jagged bursts, illuminating the prey's increasingly desperate progress along the gorge's rim. Lyra moved in parallel, staying hidden but close enough to intervene if necessary. Why she felt this urge to protect rather than to hunt, she couldn't say. It was as foreign to her as the prey herself. The inevitable happened as darkness fell completely. A section of the gorge's edge, weakened by the pounding rain, gave way beneath the prey's feet. Her startled cry cut through the storm's roar as she slid down the muddy slope, desperately grasping for any handhold to stop her descent toward the raging waters below. Lyra moved without conscious thought. In 3 swift bounds, she was at the edge of the collapse. The prey had managed to catch herself on an outcropping about 10 meters down, but was clearly struggling to maintain her grip in the mud and rain. Below her, the normally placid stream at the gorge's bottom had transformed into a churning torrent strong enough to sweep away even the largest Kara warrior. This was the perfect moment to complete her hunt. The prey was helpless, struggling, moments away from a natural death that would require no action from Lyra at all. She could simply watch and then return to the village with news of a successful final hunt, the details conveniently obscured. Instead, Lyra found herself reaching for the coil of lightweight but extremely strong vine rope that every Kara hunter carried. With practiced movements, she secured one end around a sturdy tree trunk and let the rest drop down beside the struggling prey. The prey looked up, rain plastering her strange-colored hair to her face, eyes wide with surprise and confusion at this unexpected assistance. For a moment, she hesitated, perhaps wondering if this was some new threat. Then, as the outcropping began to crumble beneath her, she grabbed the rope with both hands. Lyra braced herself and began to pull. The prey was lighter than she expected, but the mud and rain made the rescue difficult. For several heart-stopping moments, it seemed as though both of them might end up in the gorge. Then, with a final heave, Lyra pulled the prey over the edge and onto solid ground. They collapsed side by side, breathing heavily, the rain still pounding around them. The prey said something in her incomprehensible language, the tone clearly questioning. Lyra didn't respond, already questioning her own actions. What had she done? Why had she interfered with the natural course of the hunt? Before she could sort through her conflicting thoughts, a new sound cut through the storm. Voices calling in the Kara tone. Hunters approaching. Her people. Panic surged through Lyra. They couldn't find her like this, helping the prey rather than hunting it. Without explanation, she seized the prey by the arm and pulled her toward a dense thicket, pushing her roughly into the concealing vegetation. Stay, she hissed, using the command hand gesture the Kara used with their hunting companions, hoping the meaning would be clear. Either the prey understood, or she was too exhausted to resist. She remained hidden as Lyra moved to intercept the approaching hunters. It was a small group led by Tarak, a hunter only slightly older than Lyra, and one who had always resented her skills. Lyra, he greeted, water dripping from his ceremonial hunt markings. Elder Kale sent us to assist with your final hunt, but I see you have not yet claimed your prey. The implied criticism was clear. 5 days was an unusually long time for any hunt, let alone one conducted by the tribe's most skilled hunter. I need no assistance, Lyra replied coldly. The final hunt is mine alone. The prey is clever and quick, but I am closing in. Return to the village and tell Elder Kale that I will return when the hunt is complete, not before. Tarak's eyes narrowed suspiciously. And where is this clever prey now? Surely you haven't lost track of it in a mere storm. The prey shelters in a cave system to the east, Lyra lied smoothly. I was scouting for approach routes when I heard your clumsy progress through the forest. Go. Your presence disturbs my hunt. For a tense moment, Tarak looked as though he might challenge her further. Then, with a curt nod, he signaled to the others, and they disappeared back into the storm-lashed forest. Lyra waited until she was certain they were gone before returning to the thicket. The prey was still there, shivering now from cold and probably shock. Her eyes held a mixture of fear, gratitude, and wary calculation that Lyra found oddly familiar. It was how she herself assessed complex situations. With a conflicted sigh, Lyra gestured for the prey to follow her. They needed shelter, and she knew just the place. The cave was small but dry, its entrance partially concealed by a curtain of hanging vines. Lyra had discovered it years ago during a training hunt and had kept knowledge of it to herself. A private retreat when she needed solitude from the constant expectations of the tribe. Inside, she quickly built a small fire, carefully managing the smoke to ensure it wouldn't be visible from outside. The prey watched her work with obvious interest, occasionally making soft sounds that might have been attempts at communication. Once the fire was established, providing both warmth and light, Lyra finally took a moment to truly look at her. What? Not prey, not anymore. But what then? The female was approximately Lyra's height, but with a slighter build. Her skin was paler than any Kara's, and her hair was an unusual shade that reminded Lyra of the golden pollen of certain forest flowers. Her clothing, though torn and muddy now, was clearly designed for function over ornament, with multiple pockets and fastenings of mysterious design. Most striking were her eyes, a vivid blue like the deepest parts of the crystal falls, alert and intelligent despite her obvious exhaustion. They studied Lyra with the same careful assessment that Lyra was giving her. After a long silence broken only by the crackling of the fire, the prey, no, the stranger, reached slowly into one of her pockets and withdrew a small, complex-looking device. She manipulated it briefly before holding out toward Lyra, her expression hopeful. The device emitted a series of sounds, clearly an attempt at communication, but meaningless to Lyra. She shook her head. The stranger frowned in concentration, adjusted something on the device, and tried again. This time, Amid the gibberish, Lyra caught what might have been a heavily accented attempt at a Kara greeting. Surprised, Lyra responded slowly, using the simplest form of the greeting traditionally offered to children or outsiders from other tribes. "I hear your voice in the forest." The stranger's face lit up with excitement. She quickly adjusted her device again and spoke into it. After a moment, it produced a rough approximation of, "I thank you. Save me." Why? It was a good question, one Lyra wasn't sure she could answer, even to herself. Instead of trying, she reached into her own pack and withdrew the device she had found by the river. The stranger's eyes widened in recognition, and she made a sound that needed no translation, relief and gratitude combined. Lyra handed it over. "Your voice is in this." "I heard it." The stranger nodded eagerly as her device translated. She held up the recovered item. "Log. Record. Science." The translation was crude, missing nuance, but the general meaning was clear enough. This was some kind of record of the stranger's observations, important to her work, whatever that might be. "What is your work?" Lyra asked, curiosity overcoming caution. "Why are you here on Xylos?" The translation device struggled with a more complex question, but the stranger seemed to understand. She pointed to various plants visible at the cave entrance, then to herself, then made gestures suggesting collection and study. "Science. Learn. Plants. Animals. Peace." A researcher, then, not a threat, not an invader, just a curious mind seeking knowledge. Something about that resonated with a part of Lyra she rarely acknowledged, the part that sometimes wondered about the world beyond the hunting grounds, beyond the rigid traditions of the Kara. The stranger was watching her closely, clearly trying to decipher Lyra's thoughts. After a moment, she pointed to herself. Ilera. A name. She was offering her name. Among the Kara, names were sacred things, not given lightly to outsiders. That this stranger, Ilera, would so freely share hers was yet another marker of how different their worlds must be. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra touched her own chest. "Lyra," Ilera smiled, the expression transforming her face into something almost familiar despite its alienness. "Lyra," she repeated carefully. "Thank you, Lyra." Something shifted in that moment. A boundary crossed, a connection formed. Lyra knew with sudden clarity that she could never complete her final hunt, never take Ilera's life. The realization should have filled her with shame and dread, but instead, she felt an odd sense of liberation. They spent the night in the cave, the storm raging outside. Through a combination of simple Kara words, Ilera's increasingly effective translation device, and expressive gestures, they managed a basic exchange of information. Ilera was indeed a researcher, part of something called the Alliance, sent to study life on Xylos. Her vessel, the crashed metal contraption, had malfunctioned during approach, and she had lost contact with her people. She had been trying to repair her communication device to call for rescue, while simultaneously conducting her research, not wanting to waste the unexpected opportunity despite her predicament. When Lyra, haltingly, explained the purpose for which she had been tracking Ilera, the researcher's expression shifted through shock to understanding and ultimately to a kind of resigned acceptance that impressed Lyra deeply. There was no fear, no pleading, just a calm acknowledgement of the situation's gravity. "Why save me?" Ilera asked again, more directly this time. "If I am prey." Lyra had no easy answer. "You are not prey," she finally said. "You are person. Different, but person. The elders don't understand. They see only old ways." It was dangerously close to blasphemy against the traditions that had shaped Kara society for countless generations. Yet saying it aloud felt right in a way that had nothing to do with tradition and everything to do with truth. Ilera nodded slowly. "Where I come from, we once hunted too. For food, for survival. Not anymore. We learned different ways." The concept was so foreign that Lyra struggled to grasp it. A society without hunting? Without the clear hierarchies and purposes that the hunt provided? How did they know their place? How did they prove their worth? "Your weapons," Lyra gestured to the various devices Ilera carried. Not for hunting, Alara smiled sadly. For learning. For helping. Communication. Medicine. She touched the bandage on her arm. Not for killing. Not anymore. The conversation continued until both were too exhausted to maintain it. As Lyra drifted into sleep, she found herself wondering about a world where worth was measured by knowledge rather than skill in the hunt, by healing rather than killing. It was a disquieting thought, yet strangely compelling. Morning brought clearing skies and a difficult decision. The storm had passed, but Lyra's dilemma remained. Elder Kale would be expecting her return, successful hunt completed. Tarak and the others would have reported her strange behavior. Questions would be asked, and answers would be demanded. You go back, Alara asked, somehow sensing the direction of Lyra's thoughts. Lyra nodded grimly. Must go, but not finish hunt. She touched the bloodstone blade at her hip. This stays clean of your blood. Alara's expression was troubled. They punish you? Yes. There was no point in lying. Failure in the final hunt was rare, deliberate refusal unheard of. The consequences would be severe, expulsion from the tribe at minimum, possibly worse. I go with you, Alara said firmly. Explain. My fault. Lyra shook her head emphatically. No, too dangerous. Elders not listen. They see only stranger, only prey. They argued about it as they broke camp, but ultimately, Lyra's understanding of her own people won out. They agreed that Alara would make her way back to her crashed vessel, continuing to try to contact her people, while Lyra returned to face the consequences of her choice. Before they parted, Alara pressed one of her devices into Lyra's hand. Keep. Maybe help. Has maps, information, knowledge. She tapped her head meaningfully. Power different from Blade. Lyra accepted the gift, tucking it securely into an inner pocket of her hunting vest. They shared one final look, hunter and would-be prey, now something indefinable to each other, before going their separate ways. Or so Lyra thought. She had been walking for less than an hour when she heard it. A distant roar that made the ground beneath her feet tremble. Every instinct screamed danger, and she broke into a run toward the sound before conscious thought could intervene. Cresting a ridge, she saw the source of the disturbance. A pack of vexers, massive predators rarely seen in this part of the forest, had cornered Alara against a rock face. The researcher was holding them at bay with some kind of light-emitting device that seemed to confuse the beast temporarily, but they were advancing steadily, their massive jaws and claws designed for tearing through the toughest hides. Lyra didn't hesitate. With a war cry that startled both Alara and the Vexers, she charged, bloodstone blade drawn. The Vexers, momentarily confused by this new threat, hesitated just long enough for Lyra to reach Alara's side. Told you. Dangerous, Lyra grunted, positioning herself between Alara and the regrouping predators. Not argue now, Alara replied, adjusting her light device to a different setting. Have plan. Light confuses them. You attack when they're disoriented. It was a good strategy, showing a tactical mind that Lyra could respect. She nodded sharply. On your mark. What followed was unlike any hunt Lyra had ever experienced. Instead of stalking and striking alone, she found herself part of a coordinated team. Alara would flash her light device in complex patterns that temporarily blinded or confused the Vexers, creating opportunities for Lyra to strike with a blade. Not killing blows. Even these predators had their place in Xylos' ecosystem, but precise wounds that drove them back, teaching them that this prey was too costly to pursue. They moved together with an unexpected synchronicity, covering each other's vulnerabilities, enhancing each other's strengths. When one Vexer nearly caught Lyra with a sweeping claw, Alara's perfectly timed light blast saved her from serious injury. When another began to adapt to the light, becoming more aggressive, Lyra's swift blade work drove it back. Eventually, the Vexers decided the hunt wasn't worth the cost. They retreated, snarling their frustration but accepting defeat. Lyra and Alara, breathing hard but exhilarated, found themselves standing victorious side by side, the bloodstone blade dripping with Vexer blood rather than Alara's. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in their relationship to each other, but in Lyra's relationship to her most deeply held beliefs. The blade she had always used alone had proven more effective when paired with Alara's light. The hunt she had always conducted in solitary pursuit had succeeded as a partnership. Their shared triumph was short-lived. As they caught their breath, the unmistakable sound of Kara hunting horns echoed through the forest. Lots of them, approaching fast. "The tribe comes," Lyra said grimly. "Elder Kale leads them." Alara looked at her with concern. "You run now? Come with me." It was tempting to flee, to avoid the confrontation, to explore the possibilities of a different path. But Lyra knew it would only delay the inevitable. The Kara were exceptional trackers. They would find them eventually. And running would only confirm her shame in the eyes of her people. "No," she decided. "I face them. My choice, my consequence." Alara nodded, respecting the decision even as concern clouded her features. "I stay with you." This time, Lyra didn't argue. They stood together, weapons lowered but ready, as Elder Kale and at least 20 Kara hunters emerged from the forest edge. Tarak was among them, his expression a mixture of vindication and disgust as he took in the scene. Lyra standing protectively beside her prey, both of them alive and unharmed. Elder Kale stepped forward, his ancient face a mask of cold fury. The ceremonial staff he carried, traditionally used only for the most sacred rituals, struck the ground with each deliberate step. "Lyra, daughter of Kara," he intoned, using her full ceremonial address. "Explain what my eyes witness." Lyra straightened, meeting his gaze steadily. "I have chosen not to complete the final hunt, Elder. This outsider is not prey. She is a person, a researcher from beyond our world, with knowledge and skills that could—" "Silence!" Kale roared, striking his staff against the ground with enough force to make the nearest hunters flinch. "You dare to deny the sacred traditions? To elevate an outsider to personhood? To stand beside it in battle?" He gestured to the Vexer blood on her blade. "You have tainted the bloodstone blade with common predator blood rather than sanctifying it with the blood of your final hunt. You have failed your people, your ancestors, and yourself." The formal language made the condemnation all the more cutting, but Lyra stood firm. "I have followed a different truth, Elder. A truth that says not all outsiders are prey. That knowledge may be as valuable as hunting skill. That cooperation may be as powerful as solitary prowess." Murmurs ran through the assembled hunters. Such ideas were revolutionary, blasphemous. Yet Lyra could see that her words resonated with some of the younger hunters, whose expressions showed confusion and thoughtfulness rather than the outright rejection visible in the older members. Kale noticed it too. His next words were directed not just at Lyra, but at all who might be swayed by her heresy. "The penalty for abandoning the final hunt is exile. The penalty for aiding prey is the stripping of marks." He pointed to Lyra's scarified honors, each one representing a successful hunt. "You will leave our lands unmarked, unnamed, unremembered." It was worse than Lyra had feared. Exile alone would have been painful, but bearable. The stripping of marks was a ritual humiliation reserved for the most dishonorable actions, a physical and spiritual erasure of identity. Before she could respond, Alara stepped forward, her translation device held up. "Honored Elder," the device approximated in halting Kara speech. "Lyra has shown greatest honor. She saved my life when no need. She fight beside stranger when easier to let die. This not weakness. This strength your people not know yet." Kale's expression darkened further at the audacity of the prey addressing him directly. He raised his staff, and the hunters around him tensed, hands moving to weapons. The prey dares to speak, to defend its fail hunter? This abomination ends now. He gestured to Tarak. "Complete what she could not. Take the outsider's life and restore honor to this hunt." Tarak stepped forward eagerly, his own hunting blade gleaming. But his path was immediately blocked by Lyra, the bloodstone blade, raised in a defensive position. "You will not touch her," Lyra stated, her voice low and dangerous. "She is under my protection. Gasps and exclamations broke out among the hunters. To threaten another Kara in defense of prey was unprecedented. Kale's face contorted with rage and disbelief. You would raise your blade against your own people? For this thing from the stars. For a person who has shown more wisdom and courage than many born to the Kara, Lyra countered. Alara does not hunt to kill, but to learn. Her people explore not to conquer, but to understand. There are different ways to be strong, elder, different kinds of hunts to be honored. A few of the younger hunters were nodding now, their expressions thoughtful. Kale saw it and recognized the threat to his authority, to the entire Kara way of life. Enough, he commanded. Tarak, subdue the exile. The rest of you, secure the outsider. The bloodstone blade will taste the blood it was promised, whether by Lyra's hand or another's. The hunters moved forward uncertainly, torn between obedience to their elder and reluctance to attack one of their own, especially one as respected as Lyra had been. Tarak had no such hesitation. He lunged forward, blade aimed at Lyra's unprotected side. What followed was chaos. Lyra deflected Tarak's attack with practiced ease, but more hunters joined the fray. Alara used her light device defensively, creating disorienting flashes that confused several attackers. They fought back-to-back, a seamless unit despite having known each other for only days. Then, unexpectedly, two young hunters, Nara and Kivin, whom Lyra had trained personally, switched sides, turning to defend against their fellow Kara. The exile speaks truth. Kivin called out as he blocked an attack meant for Alara. I have watched the stars since childhood and wondered what knowledge they hold. Why must curiosity be sacrificed for tradition? And I have questioned the final hunt since I was assigned mine, Nara added, skillfully disarming an older hunter without injuring him. Why must leadership be earned through killing rather than wisdom? Their defection created just enough confusion and division to open a narrow escape route. Lyra, seeing the opportunity, made a split-second decision. Alara, run for your vessel, she commanded. Nara, Kivin, go with her. Ensure she reaches it safely. She tossed Alara the small communication device they had been using. Contact your people. There is a future here, but it must begin with your survival. And you, Alara demanded, even as she backed toward the forest edge. Lyra faced Kale and the loyalist hunters. I will give them something else to hunt. Before Alara could protest, Lyra charged directly at the surprised elder Kale, the bloodstone blade flashing in the dappled sunlight. Not to kill, never that, but to create a distraction so complete that none would think to pursue the fleeing researcher and young hunters. Her gambit worked. Outraged by this direct challenge to their leader, every remaining hunter focused entirely on subduing Lyra. She fought brilliantly, disabling rather than killing, using her superior skill to lead them on a wild chase away from Alara's escape route. Eventually, inevitably, they overpowered her through sheer numbers. Lyra found herself forced to her knees before Elder Kale, her own bloodstone blade now held at her throat by Tarak. Your allies have fled with the outsider, Kale said coldly. They share your exile. But you, Lyra, who were to be Storm's Eye, who carried the hopes of our people, your punishment will be witnessed by all Kara as a reminder of the cost of betrayal. Lyra, bruised and exhausted but unbowed, met his gaze defiantly. I accept exile. I accept the stripping of marks. What I did, I would do again. Kale studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his ancient eyes. Perhaps recognition of the same iron will that had made Lyra the tribe's finest hunter. Perhaps a grudging respect for her conviction, even as he condemned the beliefs behind it. So be it, he finally pronounced. The traitor shall be marked as such and cast out. The bloodstone blade will be returned to the temple until a worthy successor emerges. He looked around at the assembled hunters, noting the absent young ones who had defected, and let all remember the cost of questioning the way of the hunt. The stripping of marks was performed that night, in the central clearing of the Kara village. The entire tribe was required to witness as each of Lyra's earned hunt marks was ritually scarified again, erasing the raised patterns and replacing them with the smooth, flat scars of dishonor. Through it all, Lyra remained silent, her eyes fixed on the twin moons of Xylos visible through the canopy above. When dawn broke, she was escorted to the boundary of Kara territory, given only the most basic supplies: a simple knife, a water skin, a single day's food. The bloodstone blade was conspicuously absent, returned to its ceremonial place in the tribal temple. Beyond this point, you are nameless. Kale intoned the traditional exile pronouncement. No Kara shall speak of you, hunt with you, or acknowledge your existence. You walk alone until death claims you. Lyra nodded once, accepting the sentence without visible emotion. Then, without looking back, she stepped across the boundary and began walking toward the distant mountains where Alera's crashed vessel lay. She was halfway there when a familiar sound made her freeze in place. The subtle hum of Alera's translation device. Turning, she found Nara and Kivin emerging from the forest, with Alera close behind them. We waited, Nara said simply. We knew you would come this way. The Alliance responded to my signal, Alera added, her device translating. They send ship. Soon. We can leave this place, all of us. Lyra looked at the three of them, two young Kara hunters who had given up everything to follow a new path, and an alien researcher who had shown her that there were different forms of strength, different ways to hunt, different measures of worth. Leave Xylos. The concept was both terrifying and strangely liberating. To go where? Anywhere, Alera replied, her genuine smile visible even without translation. Everywhere. The stars hold more knowledge than any single lifetime could gather. Your skills, your adaptability, your courage, these are valued beyond measure by the Alliance. You could be more than a hunter. You could be an explorer, a bridge between worlds. The offer was tempting, the possibilities dizzying. Yet as Lyra looked back toward the forest that had been her home, she realized there was work to be done here first. Others will question, as Nara and Kivin did, she said slowly. Other young ones will look to the stars and wonder. They will need someone to show them that there is honor in curiosity, strength in compassion, wisdom in change. Understanding dawned in Alera's eyes. You would stay, even in exile? Not in the deep forest, not in Kara lands, Lyra decided, but here, on the border. A bridge, as you said, between old ways and new possibilities. Nara and Kivin exchanged glances, then nodded firmly. We stay with you, Kivin declared. We will build something new here. Something that honors the best of Kara ways while embracing the knowledge Alera has shown us exists beyond our world. Alera considered this, then nodded slowly. The Alliance seeks peaceful contact, mutual exchange. Perhaps I can arrange to return to be liaison, to bring knowledge, medicine, tools for learning rather than hunting. She touched the device at her hip. My research was only beginning. There's much more to study on Xylos, much your people could teach mine as well. And so a new path was forged. When the Alliance rescue ship arrived, Alera went with them, but not before helping establish a small settlement at the edge of Kara territory. Lyra, Nara, Kivin, and a few other curious young hunters who trickled away from the tribe in the following months created a community dedicated to blending the best of both worlds, the survival skills and environmental harmony of the Kara with the knowledge and technological benefits Alera's people offered. Alera returned, as promised, with others of her kind. Respectful exchanges began, limited at first, carefully managed to avoid disrupting Kara society too drastically, but growing more substantial over time. Medicine that saved lives during a harsh winter. Agricultural techniques that supplemented hunting. Educational opportunities for the children of both communities. Elder Kale and the traditionalists maintained their distance, clinging to the old ways. But as seasons passed, even they could not deny the benefits of selective collaboration. A fragile truce emerged, then a cautious respect, and eventually limited cooperation. The bloodstone blade remained in the temple, its purpose slowly being redefined. Young Kara still undertook hunts to prove their worth, but fewer ended in death. Skills demonstrated, respect for prey shown, restraint exercised. These became the new measures of a successful hunter. Lyra never regained her name among the traditionalist Kara, never had her dishonorable scars removed or replaced. She wore them as badges of a different kind of honor. Markers of the day, she chose compassion over killing, understanding over dominance. Years passed. The settlement grew. Young hunters from the traditional village would sometimes slip away to listen to the stories Lyra told of different worlds, different ways of being. Some returned to the old ways with new perspectives. Others stayed to join the bridging community. On the 5th anniversary of her exile, Lyra stood at the edge of the settlement, watching a small alliance ship descend through Xylos's atmosphere. Alara would be on it, as she was twice each year, bringing new knowledge, taking Kara wisdom back to her people. "Do you ever regret it?" Nara asked, standing beside her. "Not completing your final hunt? Not becoming Storm's Eye?" Lyra considered the question seriously, her gaze tracking the ship's graceful approach. "I did not abandon the hunt," she finally said. "I simply found a different prey. Knowledge instead of blood. Understanding instead of dominance. Connection instead of solitary glory." She smiled slightly. "And I may not be Storm's Eye to the Kara, but I see more clearly now than I ever did then." The ship landed in the clearing they had prepared, its sleek design a stark contrast to the natural materials of the settlement buildings. As the hatch opened and Alara emerged, her face lighting up at the sight of her old friends, Lyra felt a deep sense of rightness settle in her chest. She had been the deadliest huntress on her planet, until she refused to kill. Now she was something else entirely, a bridge builder, a truth seeker, a guardian of a different kind. And the hunt continued, endless and evolving, as all good journeys should.